Today we talk about the prestigious Boston Marathon run yesterday, dominated once again by East African athletes, and then we look to the dark underbelly of the sport as we investigate the suspension of the leading athlete management firms in Kenya, pending an investigation into their role in the doping scandals plaguing Kenyan athletics. They say the art of conversation is to talk about the right thing at the right time, and this is the right place. You're watching The Conversation. Welcome to The Conversation. I'm Alonge, and in the studio with me today is athletics correspondent Phil Minchell. Hello, Phil.
Good to see you.
Pleasure having you join us again. And also joining us again on Skype this time is Yomi Omogbeja, editor of athleticsafrica.com. Hello, Yomi.
Hi, hey.
Pleasure having you. Okay, let's start. Yesterday was Patriots Day in the United States, and of course that meant the Boston Marathon. This is one of the big 6 world marathon majors, still recovering from the awful attack 2 years ago. But despite the chill affecting crowd numbers, the world was watching and tweeting this huge sporting event as Ethiopia's Lelisa Desisa won the men's race and Kenya's Caroline Rotich came first in the women's race. Okay, Phil, we saw some tweets there about the performance of African athletes and also about the marathon as a whole. From your perspective, I know it was chilly, but what did the time tell us about the Boston Marathon this year?
Well, the time didn't really tell us anything at all. It was just under 2:10. But what it did tell us is Lelisa Desisa is a fantastic marathon runner. This was the 7th time out of his 8th marathons that he's finished first or second. 3rd marathon victory. And it's a fantastic performance from Desisa. He was second in Dubai earlier this year, and he's carried on year after year since he made his debut in 2013, just really churning out terrific runs. He's beating a world-class field every single time. And apart from failing to finish in Boston last year, when he wasn't quite 100% fit, he's the man to beat at the moment, and he's a silver medalist from the World Championships 2 years ago.
And a very popular win in Boston. For those of you at home who don't know, 2 years ago when he won, he actually donated his winning medal to the city. Again, looking across social media, he seems to be a very popular character amongst the fans of marathon running.
Yes, as you saw from those clips there, everybody was talking about the fact that it was very, very difficult not just to win Boston once, but to win it twice, and after a 2-year gap as well. And that shows that he's really in a groove at the moment. He's probably the most consistent marathon runner in the world. Other people have won the World Championships, going back to 2012, of course. Uganda's Stephen Kiprotich won the Olympic marathon, but time after time, over the last 3 years, he's been there or thereabouts. And he's a popular figure in Boston, as you rightly say. He's a folk hero in many respects. He speaks quite good English, and he's really been taken to the hearts of Bostonians, the American running community, and generally across the world.
Okay, Yomi, let's come to you. Looking at the women's race, there's a sprint finish at the end. Would you say the favourite won? I thought Dibaba was an early favourite to win the race, but what did you think of her race and, of course, Rotich's win overall?
Yeah, initially, we all knew it was going to be a fight between the Kenyans and the Ethiopians at the end anyway. And Caroline Rotich has been, she's been coming up in the past 2 years. She was 4th in the Chicago Marathon last year and also in Tokyo Marathon last year. And in 2013, she actually won the Prague Marathon. So she's been building up, but you expect that the Ethiopians will have more than, enough to win. So I was surprised that because when she kicked, none of the 2 Ethiopians couldn't live with her after that. So it's quite interesting. I'm looking forward to the marathon at the World Championships in Beijing.
Actually, I was going to talk to you. I'll come to you about that, Phil. In terms of indicators, I mean, the marathon season's in full swing, as it were. Lots of different marathons going on, and I guess as the spotlight falls on the marathon season, more talent is emerging, more names are emerging. As a portentous look, or as a look ahead to the World Championships, any themes? Ethiopia, Kenya. Where do you see the strongest and the best coming from at the World Champs?
Well, at the moment, of course, we're looking really at who's doing well at these spring marathons. And we've got London Marathon coming up, we've had Boston, we've had Paris, we've had a whole number of other marathons. Desisa will definitely be going to the World Championships. The Ethiopians select on form, but Caroline Rotich, well, there's such great depth in Kenyan women's marathon running at the moment. There's no guarantee by any stretch of the imagination she'll be going. That depends on the vagaries of the Kenyan selection process, so it'll be very interesting to see that. But also coming up, we're looking ahead next weekend to the London Marathon. We've got the two fastest marathon runners in the world, Wilson Kipsang, Dennis Kimetto, as well as Emmanuel Mutai running in that particular race. But the Kenyans seem to focus more on the big money, on the big marathons, because they can get more out of a big money marathon such as London or Berlin in the autumn, or even Tokyo, some of the Asian marathons, than going to the World Championships. Where the Ethiopians are concerned, it's a matter of pride, and they do tend to put their best runners into the World Championships. Let's see what happens this weekend. Let's see what Dennis Kimetto and Wilson Kipsang say about whether they're going to Beijing. I have a feeling they're not going to go, to be honest. They're going to chase the money in the autumn.
Okay, we'll look at some of the other vagaries in Kenyan athletics after the break, I'm sure. But Yomi, I want to come to you. Looking ahead to the London Marathon, what are your expectations going into it?
Well, I'm just going to see the athletes really. For me, I'm just trying to see which of the athletes have a better chance of getting medals for Africa at the World Championships. That's a big event for this year. So now we've seen the Desisa in Boston. I would like Phil said, just to see what Wilson and Kimetto will do in London. I'll be up in London to talk to both of them before the race. So basically, just to look at the chances the form the athletes are, especially with all the crises that have happened in Kenya recently. It would be nice to see Kenyans marathon kind of shaking off those Jepto issues.
Okay, we are going to come back to that, especially the Kenyan issue. So we'll come back to after the break. But at the moment, I'd like you to pick me a winner from the men's and the women's, if you like, for London next weekend. A name from each. I
think Kimetto, you've got to go with the man in form. He's the world record holder. With the women's, completely open, to be honest. I'm not going to get drawn on that one.
Okay, Yomi, you quickly give me a women's winner, one word.
Well, I don't know. I'm keeping it open as well.
Okay. All right, when we come back after the break, we'll look a bit further into the issues surrounding Kenyan athletics at the moment. See you after the break. Welcome back to the conversation. In what appeared to be an attempt to rescue the country's image, Athletics Kenya last week announced it had suspended two of the country's largest athlete management firms, pending a probe into their role in a series of doping scandals which has engulfed the sport in Kenya.
Speaking at a press conference in Nairobi, Athletics Kenya President Isaiah Kiplagat announced the suspension of Rosa Association and Valore Sports for 6 months, paving the way for investigations.
This suspension, or in the normal the Kenyan way now, stepping aside, will be for a period of 6 months. Then we'll decide. The two that we have today decided that we put them aside until the investigations are complete are the Rosa and Associates and the Gerald van der Veen.
The suspension of the two companies, one run by Italian Gabriela Rosa, the other by Dutchman Gerard van der Veen, could deal a blow to the many elite athletes under their stewardship. Athletics Kenya, however, said it would ensure that athletes would still be able to attend Diamond League and IAAF events.
We know the two that we are going to mention manage the highest number of elite athletes in this country. We will therefore, working with the IAAF and the meet promoters like the Diamond Leagues and so forth, to agree on the modalities of how we are going to manage these athletes so that they don't miss competition.
Doping allegations have been a thorn in Athletics Kenya's side since the beginning of the year, with positive returns on doping tests already claiming the careers of high-profile athletes managed by the two firms. The most famous case was that of 3 times Boston and 2 times Chicago marathon champion Rita Jeptu of Rosa, who was banned for 2 years in January for the use of the steroid EPO.
Okay, Phil, I don't, we were just talking whilst that was on there, and we try not to be Eurocentric about how we see it, but I don't really understand. I mean, what are the ramifications of an athlete having his management taken over for 6 months by the Athletics Federation?
Well, it does appear to be none in truth, because they were saying that the athletes themselves can still run in IAAF competitions, IAAF sanctioned events, and if you're a track athlete, it's the two agents in question handle mainly road runners. If you're a track athlete, you can still run in the IAAF Diamond League, which starts next month. So what are the ramifications? What are Athletics Kenya actually going to do for the athletes while the two agents are supposedly suspended? To be perfectly honest, as we were talking about before the break, Dennis Kometa and Wilson Kipsang are both represented by one of the agents that was talked about there, the Dutch agent Gerard van der Veen. He's still going to be representing those athletes. He's still going to be present in London in the coming week, and he is still going to be acting on their behalf, administering their funds, and presumably dealing with all the ramifications of dealing with the tax authorities both in Britain and in Kenya. What are Athletics Kenya going to do? And to my mind, it does appear as though Athletics Kenya are acting unconstitutionally. I do know that the IAAF are actually investigating the Athletics Kenya's actions, but it appears that they've just thought that this might be a good thing without actually looking at their own constitution and the IAAF constitution.
I mean, Yomi, this is something that I've seen out on your site actually as well. I mean, what's your take on, I mean, as an athlete, is it something that you think is distracting to the athletes who are going into competition over summer, or do you think actually they should trust the federation is doing the right thing for the sport at large in Kenya?
Well, there's been an issue with this. Let me just say, Athletics Kenya actually has a valid point, but then the way they've gone about this is been completely the wrong way. And also there are a lot of politics in play in this as well, why this decision is taken. Normally, if you have such investigation, I think it's normal to say the people involved should be, suspended for some time while you finish the investigation, or temporary suspension. However, bear in mind that the season is just starting and all these things are working now, you expect that some of these things should have been done at the off-season when this Jepto issue was actually there. So also, if you realize that some of the athletes, especially the one with Vola Sports, like Wilson Kipsang, for instance, is the chairman or the arrowhead of the Professional Association of Athletes in Kenya. And they've been at loggerheads with the Athletics Kenya for the past few months, trying to get Mr. Clipper kicked out of the federation as well. So again, this might be the way for the federation to actually, kind of hit back.
Okay, Yomi, let me jump in on that point, actually. Phil, do you think so? I mean, we're talking about politics there. The athletes that Yomi's just referred to, the athletics body anyway, came out and said there are many things that athletes have to go through with their own training or with their agency. And perhaps this might not be the best time to say, because obviously part of the issue is what exactly your agency is getting you to do to be successful. But they did make the point that actually it's a very much a trusted relationship as you'd have with a lawyer-client or any sort of business manager. And they don't want to have the federation having access or having control of that. Do you think this is a broader power play to do with that, perhaps?
I think so. I think you've hit the nail on the head there, because the Federation has for a long time felt that athletics agents have been wresting control of the athletes away from them. It's the agents who negotiate their appearances in marathons and in the Diamond League and the many, many other athletics meetings around the world. The only time the Federation really, let's use the word, controls their athletes is at the World Championships, African Championships and the other world events, like we've got coming up in the near future on the calendar, the IAAF World Relays, and we've also got the IAAF Youth Championships coming up in July. So those are the only opportunities that the Federation really has to bring the athletes under their wing. It is a power play. It is trying to say, we're the bosses here. But at the same time, it's always the bigger picture. You can ask and we've asked it many times on the conversation, what do African athletics federations really do for their athletes? And that's what the athletes are asking. They're saying, well, Athletics Kenya, what are you doing for us if you actually want to control our lives in this way?
And Yomi, speaking from your own perspective, obviously with your experience as well, is this something that as an athlete you'd have been comfortable with, especially perhaps if you're an athlete in some of the agencies which haven't been suspended? Isn't there a danger then you're creating a situation where you have some athletes in with the federation and some athletes left to forage on their own? Or what happens if these two companies get banned for good and those athletes have to find other homes for their business? I mean, there's so many ramifications of this. Are you clear which way, or do you think there's a route map of which way we're heading?
Well, I think at some point this will be sorted out, actually. But also you need to look at the fact that the athletes also have power. There's, for instance, there's a World Championship coming. The Kenya government will want some of these athletes to compete. Until they won't allow this thing to stretch. But then if you look at the fact that the athletics federations in Africa are not really that equipped to do some of these things. They don't really have the structure in place to do this kind of stuff. I don't even think they have the staff to handle this. But normally, Athletics Kenya engages these agents, and they are the ones that pick them and send their forms annually to the IAAF. So what I'm saying is, if they had problems with some of this agency, they could actually have waited till it's time for renewal of these applications and then decide to, okay, we deny you because you had your athletes under your staple has had a lot of problems in the last few years, and we don't trust this relationship anymore. But then,
I want to jump in there actually, because you made a point in the last few years, but also when we were talking beforehand, actually Phil, quite interesting, has got evidence here, which is, sounds as something the Kenya Federation are lacking at the moment. But you have evidence here that this is not a new problem.
No, I mean, I hope the camera can pick this up, but let me just hold it up anyway. And the headline on this newspaper clipping says, agents are evading the rules. K3A's boss, and the boss at that time was Isaiah Kiplagat. And this comes from the Kenyan newspaper, the Sunday Nation. But it doesn't come from last weekend, it comes from 1994. So consequently, this has been a problem that has been there for more than 2 decades. And you have to ask Mr. Kiplagat, if it was a problem back in the 1990s, you've had 20 more years to deal with it. Why haven't you dealt with it? Why haven't you got your own house in order? And why are the same problems pervading athletics in Kenya, and Athletics Kenya as the association is now called, as it was 20 years ago?
Okay, we're going to leave it there on that series of questions. If you want to answer them, Mr. Kiplagat, we have a chair right here. For everybody else, we'll see you after the break. Welcome back to the conversation. South Africa's fastest ever sprinter, Simon Magakwe, has been banned for 2 years for refusing to submit to an out-of-competition test. Now, what do fans of the sport think about this? As we saw there, Phil, there's well, definitely he's broken a few hearts amongst the South African fans. But actually, an interesting tweet there, which I wanted to pick up, was about Eugene Thipe or Thipe, I'm not quite sure. Apologies, Eugene. But this is his third athlete that has failed to pass the procedures of drug testing. And like in Kenya, where Rita Jebs has led to the entire agency being removed. I mean, what should South Africa do about Eugene?
Well, let's just take it back one step. In fact, there's been quite a lot of South African athletes, right the way across the board, from sprinters through to distance runners in recent years, who failed drug tests or not taken drug tests. So consequently, I think Athletics South Africa has to get its house in order on this particular issue. Athletics South Africa traditionally has been one of the better South African athletics federations, but it's clearly either not getting the message out about drug testing, or it's not getting the message out to the athletes about the fact that it's ethically irresponsible to be taking drugs. Now, the finger is definitely pointing at this particular coach. Athletics South Africa have to really get going very quickly and investigate this coach, because, you know, it's a bit like that old saying, you know, losing one parent could be considered an accident. Losing two parents is considered to be a little bit careless. You know, that was about Oscar Wilde, not Eugene Seeper. But no, Athletics South Africa really have to look at this. But as far as the athlete's concerned, I think it's a huge disappointment for the sport. As you saw, he broke many, many hearts. Last year he was Africa's top athlete, top 100-metre runner on the international circuit. 9.98 seconds is quick, and he potentially could have been a finalist at this coming World Championships in Beijing. So it's sad from that point of view.
Yomi, it's a story that's obviously your site's been following very closely, Yomi. But what I want to know, any statement back from Simon? Any well, even if it's just through a contact, anything he's been saying to defend himself?
No, not yet. Basically, the whole Simon camp had been mute about this, and the fact that they also didn't take up the option of actually appealing the case also shows that it's two things: is either they admitting guilt, or they just decide to let the matter slide. However, the Athletics South Africa released a statement clarifying the issues. That look, it wasn't a failed test; it was rule violation under IAAF Rule 32, saying refusal or failure to submit to doping control, you get automatic 2-year ban. So he's ineligible now till January 28, 2017, I think.
Okay, which obviously counts him out of the Rio Olympics. I mean, generally, we're looking at what's happening in Kenya. We're also looking at some allegations were made in the European press about Russia and investigations there. Is it that, I mean, obviously, anytime a drugs test goes wrong, as in someone fails, there's a bit of depression. But shouldn't we also be happy that the system seems to be actually now catching more people out, and Kenya, South Africa, possibly Nigeria, African countries are also having robust systems that can find, identify and catch cheats within their sport?
Absolutely, and I was perhaps a little bit critical of Athletics South Africa in my previous answer, but to be perfectly honest, the fact that there are testers in South Africa testing South Africa's top athletes and they're getting results has to be considered a good thing. And it shows that Athletics South Africa, we've talked about the Kenyan situation, but Athletics South Africa do appear to have a system in place whereby they are testing their athletes. In that respect, it has to be a good thing, and they should be, in many respects, considered to be an example for the rest of Africa.
Okay. Well, let's not end on a downer, so let's look ahead to this weekend's Youth Championships. Yomi, starting with you. The Youth Championships, I mean, it's always, is it actually an identifier of future talent? This isn't an under-18 championship. Historically, I think there's only ever been one or two on the continent before. So is this, I mean, what are we going to be looking for from this sort of event? What should we be looking out for? Performances or just the strength of federations?
Performances. Also, you're trying to identify the athletes that you can work with, the athletes that can actually go far. For instance, if you, when Nigeria hosted in 2013, we have Oduduru, we have Esebrume, and one or two of the young athletes. Those athletes were the one who went to the African Juniors this year, and they did well. And it's Oduduru actually is graduated to the seniors now. So, and he's been running quite well in the US in the last few weeks. So basically, it's an opportunity for the athletes. Also, because these athletes are in school now, it's an opportunity for them to get scholarship and get coaches, scouts that can take them to university in the US, for instance.
Okay, so Phil, let me come to Phil on that point. I mean, previous winners, are we talking about, is there a procession line of talent coming through from these age group championships to the main stage?
It's too hard to tell in an African context, but we've already seen we had the first World African Youth Championships in Warri in Nigeria 2 years ago, and that produced winners like Robert Biwott, who was a fantastic winner then at the World Youth Championships a bit later on in the summer. And any African medalist, not even a winner at the World Youth, they keep saying World, African Youth Championships, will be considered perhaps to be a medal contender at the World Youth Championships coming up in Colombia in July. But it's not just about the middle and long distance runners. At last at the last edition in Nigeria, there was an Egyptian shot putter, Mohamed Hamzi. He went on to get a medal in Donetsk at the last World Youth Championships. There was a Moroccan high jumper, Ghislaine Sabir. She won in Wari, went on to get a medal in Donetsk. So there's definitely a procession as far as getting a medal at the African Championships, going on and winning at the world level. In a world context, we've had a World Youth Championship since 1999. We've had a World Junior Championships going back to 1986. Just like at any championship, you see some people, you see names there that you're going to say they're class athletes, and you look back and you see the Kenenisa Bekelas, you see myriads of Kenyan runners who've won at these sort of levels, but you also see an awful lot of people who you've never going to see ever again. You can't tell.
Okay.
It is a way of looking into the crystal ball, though. Some of those people who win in Mauritius are going to be world stars in the coming years.
Okay, well, on that bright note, we should leave it there. It is an exciting weekend of athletics, so make sure that you're following us on Twitter and on Facebook, where we'll post your own opinions and queries, and we'll continue Africa's sporting conversation.